Phoenix, just Phoenix. Okay, that's I just had to get that down. Great to be here on a day when the Packers are taking on the Colts. I know that's going to work out well. But I never thought I would be in Green Bay on a Sunday in November. It would be 75 degrees. I mean, I almost wore shorts coming over here. It really is a treat to be with you. I've been in Wisconsin twice in the last week. Russ and I did a fun event down at Lawrence College, and Lawrence University in Appleton, and I was in Madison a couple days back. We started the day in Milwaukee, and then we're going to finish the day over in La Crosse with some folks. It's just really good to be here. We wouldn't be here if Wisconsin wasn't important. You guys are really important, and we're really counting on you. We're really counting on you on Tuesday. Just a couple of thanks, and then talk a little bit about what's at stake and how we're going to win. I'm thrilled to be campaigning with Russ. It's really been fun to be with this great public servant, great American, superb senator, superb public servant for Wisconsin and the nation. And we are so anxious to have him back in the Senate. Please do all you can. Please do all you can to make sure he comes back. Absolutely. You know, Russ talked a lot about the kitchen table issues that he's been battling for his whole career, making sure that regular working folks, regular middle-class folks who don't necessarily have the phalanx of lobbyists and lawyers and accountants, you know, pleading their case before Congress, making sure the regular folks have a voice, and he has been so super at that. But Russ mentioned that I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee. I serve on the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committee. Probably 70% of the work I do in the Senate has been about national security issues. And Russ just has the reputation of being just about the best guy in balancing the need for national security with the importance of protecting our own liberties and our rights to privacy. That's a hard balance to strike, but nobody has done that better than Russ in his public life, and that's just one of the many reasons he's going to be such a key player when we come back in January. So give your future senator another big round of applause. I know before I walked out, you heard from Heba Muhammad, who is an organizer with our coordinated campaign. Okay. Well, by that round of applause, if she ever decides to run against me, I'll retire instead of facing her. Thomas Nelson, your candidate for Congress. Give Thomas a big round of applause. And then we also have two state legislators here, Dave Hansen, who's a state senator, and Eric Genrich. And Eric Genrich, where is Eric? Eric, thank you, from a state assemblyman. These are all, you know, it's a hard job to do what you do. It's hard. Time away from family, challenging time to do politics, a lot of sacrifice involved. And those of you who do it with a servant's heart, we need to remember and thank you. So thank you guys all for what you're doing. Can I just start off by saying, Wisconsin, you're knocking it out of the park. Early vote, you guys set a record. You set a record. An amazing record that you set in early vote. Just broke it. I see some articles in the paper this morning. The GOP's mad. You know, it makes them mad when people participate. Isn't that what this is supposed to be about? I mean, isn't a small d democracy supposed to be about participation, making it easier for people, more people to participate? And now they're whining and complaining, not just here, but in other states too. We're mad that people are turning out and participating. And you're supposed to understand that's the system that we have. I was a missionary in Honduras 35 years ago. It was a military dictatorship. Nobody could vote for anything. They prayed for the day when they could have elections. They prayed for the day when they could choose their leaders and there would be peaceful transfer of power. They looked at us as a great example of a nation that gave people the opportunity to participate. That's who we are. And now we got one party that's trying to make it harder to participate, and a presidential candidate who's going around saying he doesn't trust the United States to run a fair election. Hey! And he won't even agree to accept the outcome and the results, right? If you think that poorly of the voters, if you think that poorly of our government, if you think that poorly of our election officials, why even run to be president of the United States? Don't talk down American democracy and think you're going to jump to the head of the line and be president. And that's what Donald Trump is doing, which makes me think one of the many things that makes me very puzzled. What I see and what you've done with early vote in what's happening all over the country. Nearly 40 million Americans have voted already. And we are seeing tremendous increases, upsurge in early vote in a lot of the states where we are hoping there will be strong voting. States like Florida and Ohio and North Carolina and Nevada and Colorado that have strong early vote. A state like Arizona, we've only won that once since Harry S. Truman was elected in 1948. Fantastic early voting turnout. We're seeing an energy and an excitement, and it's an energy and excitement with a new and broader coalition of voters, because they're saying, look, we see in Hillary Clinton a person that we can embrace policies we can embrace, and we see in Donald Trump policies that we want to clearly send a message that we reject. And that's what we're seeing, and that makes me excited going into Tuesday. But you guys should pat yourself on the back for it, because you broke records here in Wisconsin for early vote. And that's all on you. That's all on you and our great volunteers. I want to talk a little bit about the vision, Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, a contrast, and then just talk about how to win. How to win with just a little bit over 48 hours until the polls close. So Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I'm going to talk character, I'm going to talk vision, and I'm going to talk a couple of issues. Russ touched on some issues, and I'll talk about a couple. But, issues in a campaign, it's not a grocery list. It's not a laundry list. It's more than just issues. It's really what motivates you. So let's start right there. What motivates Hillary Clinton? What motivates Donald Trump? Hillary grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, Scranton, and then the suburbs of Chicago. Okay, we got some either Scranton or Chicago right here in the front row, maybe both. She describes this experience she had when she was a kid. When we're adolescents, that's the time when we kind of start to see the big world outside of our own particular neighborhood. She had a really interesting guy named Don Jones, who was a Methodist youth minister. Now, I met people all over the country. This guy must be a pretty amazing guy, because I met people who had been in youth groups that he led all over the country. And Don Jones exposed her to the challenges in the world that she wasn't familiar with in her neighborhood. And she developed a passion about empowering families and kids. And that was the passion that she said. She saw needs of migrants and others. I want to empower families and kids. And this was her kind of description of why. If families and children do well, that's about the best barometer for whether society as a whole is going to do well. And for her whole life, before she was in politics, and then whether she was in office or out, or winning or losing, Hillary Clinton has had this passion about empowering families and kids. As a civil rights lawyer in the South after law school, as a First Lady of Arkansas fighting for maternal and prenatal health care, First Lady of the United States, Senator from New York, Secretary of State, empowering families and kids has been a passion. In the last debate, Chris Wallace asked a question. There's 2 minutes left at the end. You each have a minute. Just make your closing argument. Hillary went right there. For 40-plus years, I've been working on the empowerment of families and kids. This has been a consistent passion in her life. And I always say, if you want to know about somebody's character in public life, look and see if they had a passion before they got in. Have they held on to it? Come hell or high water, winning or losing, have they held on to it? That will tell you something about this person. I want to tell you a story about Hillary Clinton. Russ knows this story very well. Hillary will tell the story, but I'll be honest, I tell it better than she does. because she doesn't like to brag about herself. And that's a good trait too, but I don't mind bragging about her. I like bragging about her. This is the best Hillary Clinton story that tells you the kind of president she'll be. When she was First Lady, you know that President Clinton, working together with others, tried to expand health care so that in the richest nation on earth, everybody would have health care. And that was an effort during the mid-1990s. And as you know, some are too young, but some were around. That effort was unsuccessful. Those who fought against it succeeded at that time. Hillary worked so hard on this because somebody who wants to empower families and kids knows that families having health insurance coverage is really important. If you're a parent and you go to bed at night and your kid is okay, you still are worrying, well, wait a minute, what if my kid gets sick tomorrow? What if my kid's in an accident? If you don't have health insurance for your family, it is a source of major, major anxiety. So Hillary put herself into this battle in a major way. And those fighting against it, they decided to sink it and sink her at the same time. So they called it Hillary Care. And they ran all these ads on TV, bang, 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 bashing Hillary Care. and they succeeded, and health care didn't happen. Now, thank goodness President Obama picked it up, and now 20 million more Americans have health insurance who didn't have it before, right? But at the time, that was a tough loss. She cared deeply about it. It was consistent with her lifetime passion. And they made it personal to her, and they won. That was a tough loss. This is where you learn something about the character of a person. When they put it all on the table for something they really care about, and then they come up short, and maybe come up short in a way that was personally tough, what do? What do? Do you say, well, I'll try again in 10 years? Do you change and say, well, I'm not going to worry about that anymore, I'll focus on something else? Do you just blame others, point fingers, sulk, it was all their fault, it was all on them? All those are things you could do. I mean, I've probably done those things when I haven't gotten my way. At some points in the past, that's not what Hillary did. After failing in that effort, Hillary said, you know what, we couldn't get what I really think we need, what is really going to be good for society. But how about this? If we can't get health insurance for everybody, can we get health insurance for every low-income child in this country? And Hillary went to work with great senators, Democrats and Republicans, and House members. And 20 years ago, passed the CHIP program, Children's Health Insurance Program. 8 million children, 8 million kids have health insurance in this country because Hillary Clinton wouldn't back down, wouldn't give up, and wouldn't go away. Isn't that the trait that you want in your next president? Somebody who won't back down, won't give up, won't go away. That's the kind of person that Hillary Clinton is. And here's I can't guarantee much, but I can guarantee this. The next president, whoever it is, will have days in office where it won't go his or her way. Where something the person really wants won't happen. And you got to know about that person in the Oval Office that when that day comes, the next day when the sun comes up, they're still going to be there battling for the values that motivate them, not deciding to do a U-turn or blaming others and sulking and focusing on other things. This tells you who Hillary Clinton is, and this is why she's got the stuff of character to be a great president. Now I'm going to compare it with her opponent, Donald Trump. Now, I will say this. I'm going to give Donald Trump this. He does have a passion. It's just that passion is Donald J. Trump. I mean, it's not families and kids. There's no policy issue that he's ever really been connected with. He's a guy who's been about himself every bit along the way. I was a civil rights lawyer in Virginia fighting against housing discrimination at the same time he was running apartment communities and getting sued by the Justice Department for discriminating against people who were trying to rent apartments. Stiffing contractors and small businesses that worked on his job. Stiffing students getting their money for this Trump University that turned out to be a big fraud. Again and again and again, he's a guy who is about himself. And we've never, ever in this country had a great president who put himself first. We haven't. John F. Kennedy, at his great inaugural speech, didn't say, hey, ask what your country can do for you. No, he said, ask what you can do for your country. We've all got to focus on putting country first and others first. Donald Trump hasn't done that in his whole life, and there's no reason to think he's suddenly going to start now. There just isn't. And in fact, I'll just tell you the thing. I could give you a lot of examples, but I'll give you one that makes me the maddest. In the first debate, Donald Trump promised if I run for president, I'll release my tax returns. And he hasn't. And in the first debate, Hillary was challenging. You're hiding something. And she said, you're probably hiding that you don't pay taxes. It's subsequently come out that is likely the case. He hadn't paid federal taxes for a very long time. When Hillary challenged him on that, remember what he said? That makes me smart. Oh, really? Oh, really? That makes you smart, huh? So those of us who are going to work and paying some taxes, and we may not love it, but we're paying some taxes because we do live in a society. We do have some obligations to one another. I'll give you one. 2 million young men and women volunteer to serve in a time of war, active, guard, or reserve. One of them is my oldest son, who's a Marine infantry commander, who's deployed overseas right now. Deployed overseas right now. 1% of adults serve in the military. It's all volunteer now. And 1% serve so that 99% don't have to serve. Now, do the 99% have any obligation to the 1%? Donald Trump's, no, I'm smart, man. I figured out how to pay nothing to support the 1%. And that makes me really, really smart. You got a VA hospital just a mile or so from here. We made promises to our vets that there would be a health care system for them, that if they served, they would come back, and there would be medical care for them. How does that VA system get funded? By people paying taxes? Oh, Donald Trump is so smart because he's figured out a way not to have to support our vets. And he doesn't have to support our teachers. And he doesn't have to support Pell Grants for students who need to afford to go to college. Don't tell me you're smart when you're stiffing our troops, stiffing our vets, stiffing our teachers, stiffing our students. I can think of a lot of words to describe that, and I'm not going to say them, but smart's not one of the words that I think of. It's selfish. It's selfish. Now, the other thing, that's character comparison. Now let me do a vision comparison. Hillary ran a campaign and picked right from the beginning a theme, Stronger Together, which really tries to summarize, this is the way I see it. This is Hillary saying, here's who I am, here's who the nation is, here's the direction we're going. We got this wonderful, beautiful, diverse nation, diverse. All the states are different and quirky and interesting and cool, but also our diverse population makes us so strong. It makes us an example. Different religious traditions, different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different skills, different talents. You know, we put all of our talents together, and there's so much we can do, and Hillary celebrates that. She was a civil rights lawyer, as I said, as she started off, and that's what I did too, starting off my career. We deeply believe in equality, the Jeffersonian notion that as a nation we're going to measure ourselves by considering everybody equal, and we can all be at the table together. Donald Trump, very different vision. Started off his political campaign to get political attention. He chose an issue, very odd issue. In 2011, chose an issue and wrote it for 5 years when nobody else would, saying that President Obama wasn't a U.S. citizen. It had been completely disproven. It was a complete lie. But for some reason, of all the issues he could choose, saying that our first African-American president wasn't a U.S. citizen was the issue that he chose. Now, I live in Richmond, and it was the capital of the Confederacy. I was a civil rights lawyer for 17 years. And let me tell you the way that appears to my friends and neighbors in Richmond. When Donald Trump says that for 5 years and never explains, never apologizes, never takes responsibility for the fact that it was a lie, see, what we remember is that the Dred Scott decision in the 1850s said if you were African American, you couldn't be a citizen. Even if you were born here, even if you were born here free, you couldn't be a citizen, your kids couldn't, your grandkids couldn't. 50 generations out, you couldn't be a citizen. That was the law of the United States, that if you had any African blood, you could not be a U.S. citizen. We had to fight a civil war. We had to change the Constitution to say if you were born in this country, you were a U.S. citizen, and you're not going to be blocked because of the color of your skin or where your family comes from. And so Donald Trump bringing this up out of the dustbin and insisting President Obama is a U.S. citizen hauls us back to the most painful part of our history. And for what reason? For what reason other than to divide us? Then he kicks off his campaign in his opening speech. Mexican-American immigrants are rapists and criminals. And it has been an insult fest ever since. Horrible things about women. I don't even want to go into the things that he said about women because I don't like to say these things, even to quote things that he said. But you know what he said, what he's described that he's done, and ultimately what it's revealing about the way he looks at women. He can't look at a woman and see an equal. I'm convinced there's just something missing in him about that. He's gone after Muslim Americans. He's gone after LGBT Americans. He went after John McCain, Russ's former colleague, my current colleague, who was chairman of the Armed Services Committee, POW'd in Vietnam for 4 years, and when he heard John McCain described as a hero, he said, no, he's not a hero, he got captured. I like the ones that didn't get captured. I mean, just think about this. Who even has that thought? Who, if they had that thought, would let it come out of their mouth? And this guy wants to be commander-in-chief. He went after a Virginia family up the road from me. I live in Richmond. This family from Charlottesville, the Kaine family. Beautiful family, Muslim-American family. Their son, Humayun Khan, Army captain, saved the lives of his colleagues in Iraq by spotting a suicide bomber and stopping the bomber, saved everybody's life, killed in the process. The Khans heard Donald Trump saying that Muslim Americans weren't patriotic or needed to show or demonstrate, prove their patriotism in a different way. We should keep Muslims out of the country. And they got mad. And they stood up and said, we're not patriotic. I mean, what more do we have to give? What more do we have to give to show that we care about this country? And when they had the nerve to say that, then Donald Trump started to attack them as a Gold Star family. This kind of division, if you govern that way, if you campaign that way, you're going to govern that way, and that will not do one good thing for this country, to embrace a Donald Trump-style government where it's okay to insult and divide people. You saw that he even mocked a disabled reporter, and made fun of him. Look, if that's the example that's set from the highest office in the land, that will be a very powerful example about what's acceptable. I don't think that's acceptable, and I don't think we ought to let Donald Trump in the Oval Office so that he can preach that out as a message for others. Now, couple of issues real quick, and then how we win. So the big issue, and Russ talked about this, and he knows it. I love your discussion about you go to the McDonald's and there's the corner and people are having coffee. In Virginia, it tends to be Hardee's, but it's the same. It is the same group, and they are sitting around with the coffee and they're solving the problems of the world. And usually what they're talking about is the economy and how to make it work for everybody. Now, when President Obama was elected, we were in the biggest free fall since the 1930s into this recession. And it was like President Obama came into office to do a job with one hand just dangling at his side because the GOP said, we're not lifting a finger to help you succeed. So he's had to work to the extent he can with Democrats. And over 8 years, 15.5 million more private sector jobs, unemployment rate cut in half, 401k policies worth something again. 2014 to 2015, we saw the biggest jump out of poverty. 3.5 million people moved upward out of poverty in 1 year. That's the biggest we've ever had. President Obama doesn't get enough credit for some of the things that he has done, especially given how little help he had. But Russ and I know this. If the president were here, he would say exactly what I'm going to say next. We got a long way to go. We got a long way to go because even, look, if you read a story in the paper that says unemployment rate's coming down or GDP's going up, that may be fine. But if you don't see the ladder that you can climb because of the zip code where you live or because of the industry where you're trained, that story doesn't make you feel too good. It makes you feel like you're getting left behind. And there are people all over this country who don't see the ladder that they can climb. And that's why we've got to work together to build this economy that works for everybody. Now, Hillary and I have a really simple four-pointer. Basically, let's make investments first in manufacturing, infrastructure, research. Clean energy, jobs of tomorrow, build road, rail, public transport, roll out broadband so that isolated communities are connected to the telecom of the 21st century. That's number one. Number two, that's investment in jobs. Well, let's invest in people. So more early childhood education so the kids have a great start. Celebrate great teachers, right? Repair crumbling school buildings. Make college more affordable. I'm going to come back to that one in a minute. Take a good page from our unions and really accelerate apprenticeships and career and technical training programs because we have so much need for jobs in that area here in Virginia, all over the place. So that's number two. Number three, let's make wages more fair. You shouldn't have to work full-time in this country and be below the poverty level. We ought to have a minimum wage that if you work full-time, you're not below the poverty level. And women should get paid equal for equal work. I mean, it's pretty darn basic. Pretty darn basic. And as Russ said, these are all policies that his opponent is opposed to. These policies like wage fairness and equal pay for equal work, his opponent is against. That's the third point, wages. And then the last point is, let's focus on where jobs come from. Now, jobs don't come from Wall Street, and jobs don't come from a magic wand that government waves. 65% of jobs in this country are created by small businesses. My dad ran an ironworking and welding shop. 5 people in a tough year, 10 in a good year. Hillary's dad ran a drapery printing business, just a handful of people. But this is the backbone of the American economy. So Hillary and I are like, if you want to grow the economy, don't be kowtowing to Wall Street. Make it easier to start a small business, to get credit for a small business, to hire employees if you're a small business, pay taxes if you're a small business, deal with regulations if you're a small business, buy health care if you're a small business. And that is the 4-point plan that Hillary and I have to grow the economy. And here's what economists say. They look at that. And they say, look, if you do those things, at the end of 4 years, we will have added 10.5 million jobs to this country, to this economy. So we would continue the upward path that we're on and create opportunities for others. They've also looked at the Trump plan. The Trump plan is very different. The Trump plan is tax cuts at the very top for the wealthiest individuals and the biggest businesses. And he basically even used a hand gesture. He described it as, do that, and then those people, if you give them tax cuts at the top, they'll do all kinds of things and create jobs for everybody. I call that the abracadabra hand gesture. It's like you give money to the people who are really rich, and just like magically things will happen. We know that is false because we tried it 10 years ago, and we put the economy into the deepest recession since the 1930s. Why would we do it again? I mean, in the recession, how many homes were lost? How many jobs were lost? How many pensions went belly up? And we're going to try that again? Why would Donald Trump even propose to try it again? Because, and this is my intuition, his proposal is one that would really benefit Donald Trump and people like Donald Trump, but it wouldn't benefit Wisconsin or Virginia or the U.S. And economists who look at the Trump plan say, do his plan and you lose 3.5 million jobs. So Hillary's plan grows it by 10.5. Trump's plan shrinks the economy by 3.5. That's a difference in 14 million jobs. And that's the difference between a you're hired president and a you're fired president. And I'd rather have a you're hired president than Hillary Clinton. Russ talked about costs of college, and so I'm not going to talk long about it, but this is a critical distinction between, Hillary's vision and Donald Trump's vision. Hillary basically says you shouldn't have to mortgage a future to have a future. And so what we need to do in this country is make a commitment to American families that students should be able to go to college debt-free. Not completely free. Everybody's got to have skin in the game, but you shouldn't have to get out of college with a bunch of debt on your shoulders. Debt-free first. Second, if your family is of modest means, less than $125,000 a year, we should be able to say free tuition. You have to pay room and board, but free tuition if your family is of modest means. And then third, those first two aren't going to help you if you're already out of college and if you're carrying a lot of debt around. Russ talked about this. We live in a very unusual country in this sense. It is easier in the United States of America to refinance a loan on a yacht, a vacation home, a private jet than to refinance a student loan. We're going to let people refinance student loans just like they can refinance anything else, and that will enable them to bring down their monthly payments and not get crushed under student debt. Now, the Donald Trump plan is a little bit different. You think about Donald Trump and education, the only thing that comes to mind is Trump U. I mean, he looked at education, which is like the great lifter and leveler of society, and said, hey, wait a minute, I see an opportunity to make some dough. So he set up a university that was non-accredited. It wasn't really a university, he called it that, non-accredited. He hired instructors, and he gave them very unusual instructions. Their instructions was to extract as much money from people's pocket as they can. So tell the students to max out their credit cards. Oh, wow, a veteran, they'll have a GI Bill benefit. You get a lot of money from them. Now, a veteran's widow, wow, you can really get a lot of money from them. The instructors were given instructions about how to take advantage of people. And that's why they're subject, this Trump University is subject to fraud suits all over the country. I think this is pretty important. I want a president who will look at education as a path for individual success, but also for social success. And I don't want a president who looks at education and said, wow, here's a great way for me to make a few more bucks at some other people's expense. That choice is very, very clear. Another reason why we got to elect Hillary to be our next president. And then one other issue before we just finish with how we win this thing. And this is controversial, I'll tell you, and I'll just state it right plain. Hillary and I believe in science. Now, I know that's controversial. I know it's controversial. And I mean, I felt like I could get away with that at a university. I mean, I was trying to read my audience here. I want to talk about climate for a minute. There's an international scientific consensus that production of CO2 is affecting the climate in negative ways, and that we've got an obligation to do something about it. The scientific consensus is so strong that President Obama and others in our government were able to get 197 nations to all agree to take steps to deal with climate change. The Paris Climate Accord, everybody's taking the steps they can take, because we ought to be handing off this planet to our kids and grandkids, having been good stewards of it, and offering them the same, beautiful creation that we have been able to enjoy. This is really important.
How about the North Dakota pipeline?
It is not easy. It is not easy to get 197 nations to agree on anything. I mean, it's hard to get Congress to do a Mother's Day resolution. So when you get 197 nations on board, that's pretty important. That's very important. Well, Hillary and I are going to continue the focus on dealing with climate. And what we're going to do is invest in research and new technologies, because we're going to invent the clean energy economy in this country, and we're going to grow the businesses and sell our technologies to other parts of the world. It'll be good for the environment, and it will be good for our economy. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. Now, on the other side, Donald Trump has said about climate science, climate change is a, quote, hoax created by the Chinese. That is a direct quote. Michael Pence says it is a myth. I know none of you guys know about 12-step programs, but I'll just tell you. Step one is you have to admit you have a problem. If you don't admit you have a problem, you don't get to step 2. You don't get to step 12. You don't solve a problem if you won't admit you have one. And Donald Trump and Mike Pence will not even admit that climate change is an issue. And I'll tell you something that's a little scary about that. I mean, that's scary enough, because they say they're going to tear up the climate pact on day one. They're going to have the U.S. back out of it. What are the odds that once the U.S. led this, if we back out of it, that everybody will say, well, we'll still do what we said we were going to do? No, the whole thing will fall apart. That's scary enough, but here's what's even more scary. If you won't accept climate science, what other science won't you accept? Science about food safety? Science about air quality? Science about water quality? How much lead could be in water? Science about when a drug is safe to be released in the general population, or when it should be put through a few more trials to determine if it's okay. We got to rely on science in all kinds of decisions that we make. So to elect an anti-science president about climate, you have no idea what's behind door number 3. You're going to get somebody who might be against all kinds of science in ways that would really hurt us. So that's another huge difference between a Hillary Clinton presidency and a Donald Trump's presidency. Let me get to the punchline. How are we going to win this thing? We have 48 hours left. And early vote is done here. There are some states where early vote is still going on, but now the effort here is really focused on Tuesday. For those who haven't voted, you set records, but there's still plenty who haven't voted. What do we have to do? And I like what we see. I would rather be us than them, but it's so close. If you're watching these polls and nervous about them like I am, it's so close. So the way I just want to finish is just to say, don't take anything for granted because the stakes are too high. Don't take anything for granted, because even if the polls look okay, polls have been wrong in this cycle. Don't take anything for granted because it's been a season of surprises. Don't take anything for granted because we've never had an election where a foreign government like Russia is trying to tinker around with and influence the outcome of an election. If you need one more reason to vote, how about voting to send a message to Russia and any other government that don't bother trying to come in and influence our election? We do just fine without you. We know how to run elections, and we don't need you. Don't take anything for granted, because the better we do for Hillary, the more likely Russ and a lot of folks who are good like Russ are going to be coming in. Wouldn't it be good to have a Congress that would work with President Clinton rather than one that would fight against her? And then the last thing is, don't take anything for granted, because Hillary's trying to do something that's never been done. If it had been easy for there to be a woman president of the United States, there would have been a woman president of the United States. In Congress right now, Congress is 19% women. That's the most it's ever been, but that ranks 75th in the world, far below the global average. And just to give you a comparison, the U.S. 19% in Congress women. In Iraq, in their National Assembly, 26% women. In Afghanistan, in their National Assembly, 28% women. In Rwanda, they're number one, 65% women. For some reason, I understand part of it, but I'll probably never understand all of it. We made it hard for women to be elected. church, we have the story, it's a well-known story, the Good Samaritan. Somebody's beaten up in their line at the side of the road, and they're asking for help. They need help. And a lot of people are on the road, and a whole lot of people just walk on by and don't do anything. There are leaders, there are religious leaders, there are people with titles, there are people who know better, but they just walk on by. But then in the story, the Samaritan, who in that story is a despised minority, and he has some place to go too. He has something else he's supposed to do. But he's like, well, okay, I got this thing I'm supposed to do, but somebody needs my help. And goes over and helps. And that's a story that's not about yesterday. That's a story about today and tomorrow. Because we know this, in every zip code in this country, there's people on the side of the road asking for our help. Victims of violence? Sure, but maybe suffering with an opioid addiction, or I just lost my job, or I just got diagnosed with cancer and I don't know what I'm going to do, or I'm a middle school kid getting bullied and I don't know where to go for help, or I made a mistake when I was a kid and I've been looking for 15 or 20 years for people to give me a second chance so I can get back, in the mainstream and show that I'm an okay person again. There's people at the side of the road who are asking for our help, and we're all on the road, and we all have a choice to make. Do we just walk on by, or do we go over and help? And I'll tell you the cool thing about this that is so powerful about the story and about the opportunity we have. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have any of the answers. You don't even have to know the words to say. Do you just have an instinct to go over and help? To roll up your sleeves and go over and help? I'll tell you something. Hillary Clinton is not a person who's just going to walk on by. And I'm not a person who's just going to walk on by. And you don't strike me as the kind of people who are going to walk on by. Russ Feingold's not a guy who's going to walk on by. America at our best. Wisconsin at your best. We're not the kind of people who are going to walk on by. We're going to roll up our sleeves. We're going to go over and help out. Have that underdog attitude. Have that spirit of helping out the underdog. Keep that between now and Tuesday night. Then we'll make big history for this country. The last thing I'll say, the moment, if it happens, and I don't take for granted anything will happen. You can't take anything for granted. But the moment that it happens, that Hillary Clinton is called president, history changes in a really interesting way. Because you remember it from 2008, Wisconsin and Virginia both supported President Obama. The moment that he was called president, immediately, a whole group of people in this country who had never been able to see themselves as president, never, immediately realized, I can be president. And if I can be president, I can be anything. Now, this Tuesday night, same thing's going to happen. If we do what we know how to do, and Hillary Clinton is declared the winner, the moment that happens, a whole bunch of people, good people, in this country who've never been able to see themselves as president will suddenly realize, hey, I can be president. And if I can be president, I can be anything. You guys can make this happen. This is a big deal. Let's go win. Thanks.